Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my Game Week 22 deadline decision. There is actually a deadline today, Tuesday the 30th of January. So in today's video I should cover everything you need to make your transfers, your captaincy, a little bit on chip strategy as well, and much more. If you are enjoying the content here on this channel and you get any use out of today's video, please smash that like button, make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, I expect this to be a pretty long video because there's quite a few things that I would like to cover, and I want this to be your comprehensive one-stop shop for everything that you need for Game Week 22 to make those decisions. But if you are in a rush, you can use the timestamps down below and skip to the section that you would like. The first thing that I'd like to cover is the press conference updates and just information that we have as of Monday evening. Of course, all of the information that we get on Tuesday from the press conference is likely from Klopp and Pep Guardiola. I'll, of course, cover that in the deadline stream on Tuesday. So at 4 PM UK time, I'll be streaming on Tuesday. Hopefully I'll see you on that deadline stream. But just to round up everything we know as of Monday evening, post-match, Trippier said that he'll be fine for the next game. So I've seen quite a few people that still are hanging on to Trippier and they're unsure whether they need to sell him or not. Obviously, it's not always that you just trust the player and if they say they're fine, they're going to be fine. But it looks like it was only a small knock and it doesn't look like it's something that will keep him out long term. So I think if you've got Trippier and you don't need to sell him this week and you weren't planning to sell him this week, I think that's absolutely fine. We did get news from Hal that Lascelles is likely or possibly could miss out. And we also know that Barnes and Wilson are closing in on a return. If Barnes and Wilson can come back and stay fit, alongside Isak, alongside Gordon, if Almiron comes back fit as well, then we could be in a position soonish where Gordon may well get the rest that we've been discussing. But for the time being, he looks very nailed. And as long as he is fit enough to play, I think he is the first name in that team sheet in the attack. So I don't think there's a massive amount that affects FPL there. For Chelsea, we obviously got a little bit of news that Cole has a small issue, but Pochettino said it is not a big issue. He could be available for the Liverpool game. He could not be. I mean, in an ideal world, you probably weren't planning to play him anyway. And the same goes for Gusto. But Gusto is still not in team training as of Monday. So he's still training away from the team. Obviously, he could be available for the Liverpool game as well. But again, these aren't players that you probably want to play anyway. And we now know that Chelsea blank in Game Week 26. And they're very, very unlikely to double in Game Week 25. So it may be a good time now to jump off of your Chelsea players, apart from Cole Palmer, who I still think is a really nice option. The negative news for my team, and I'll discuss my team at the end of the video, by the way, if you want to know what I'm doing with my team for this week, captaincy, all of that stuff. Pau Torres and Luca Dean are both unavailable for Game Week 22. Luca Dean is nearing a return, and Pau Torres has had a setback in his injury. God knows how long he's going to be out for now, because obviously it was a reoccurrence of the same injury. They rushed him back a little bit last time. Doesn't appear to be in team training, so it could be another few weeks at least for Pau Torres. So I think if you have him and you need a defender for this week, it could be that it's time to sell him. On Nottingham Forest, Awoniyi, Philippe and Elanga are all back in team training, but not quite at 100%. The most notable one there is, of course, Awoniyi, because some people do have Chris Wood, or they've been looking at Chris Wood as a cheaper forward. Obviously, his form, he was really good for a few games, and it's dropped off slightly, but he does still offer value. My issue is that I think Taiwo Awoniyi is their first choice forward when fully fit. Now, he won't be rushed back in. I still expect Wood to start at least Game Week 22, potentially even 23 and 24. And we could see a situation where they play alongside each other. But at some point, it could mean that Chris Wood becomes a bit of an issue. So if you were looking to keep him longer term, maybe less likely to do so now. Big news, obviously, on Arsenal is that Gabriel came off with a knock in the previous game week. He got the 17 points, which was amazing, but now he's sat there with a flag in our team. And unfortunately, we didn't get much information from Arteta. So as of Monday, we haven't seen any pictures of Gabriel in training, as far as I'm aware. And on top of that, Arteta said that a few players would be going through a late fitness test, but that Thomas Partey wasn't one of those because he's not going to be in the squad. Of course, Gabriel could also not be in the squad, but I feel like the fact that he highlighted that some players would go through a fitness test, but Thomas Partey isn't one of them, maybe suggests that Gabriel is one of those players, along with Declan Rice, that is likely to have a late fitness test. I think if he's fit, he will play, but I also think they won't rush him if he's not fully fit. So I'm a little bit unsure myself. We'll, again, discuss my team at the end of the video. I kind of need Gabriel to be fit, otherwise I may again play 10 players in Game Week 22. I would love to know down below, based on the information that we have, do you think Gabriel will be available for that Nottingham Forest game? And then the final thing is around Elise, and we weren't expecting him back this soon, but Roy Hodgson has said that Elise is available and has trained, but we have to be careful. My prediction is that Elise will either start and get like 60 minutes or he'll come off the bench. I don't see him getting 90, but it does now throw a spanner in the works because I liked Eze as an option because we knew he would be on pens. Now Elise's back. We're still not sure between Elise and Eze who's on penalties. And I would argue when they're both fully fit, Elise may be the better option. I think his goal threat is slightly higher. And if he is on penalties and also taking some set pieces off of Eze, that maybe dampens Eze as an option slightly. Although it should in general make the attack better, which may then make Eze a slightly better option. So it definitely changes the dynamic at Crystal Palace. So those are the key press conference updates and other updates that I have as of Monday evening. Again, if you want to see the Tuesday press conference updates, tune into my deadline stream at 4 p.m. But now let's move on to some other questions around chip strategy, captaincy, transfers, and much, much more. So guys, I wouldn't usually talk about chip strategy in a deadline decisions video because obviously in this video you want to get all of those last minute questions answered as quick as possible. But I do feel like we are at the point of a season now where some of your decisions will be guided by upcoming blanks and doubles and the chips that you're likely to play in those weeks, especially if you've got a bit of a 50-50 decision at the moment and you've got maybe one player that is likely to blank in a game week and another player has an upcoming double game week, then of course you should favour the player that has the double and doesn't have to blank. So I think it is important to start thinking about these upcoming blanks and doubles. I'm not going to talk about it for too long, although I probably will, because before Game Week 24, I'm going to have an entire chip strategy video when we have a little bit more information. But there have been quite a few questions around what is the best strategy moving forward. So I'm going to have a quick go at going through 4 strategies here. Just to recap what blanks and doubles are coming up, I'll try to do this as simply as possible because, to be honest, it is pretty simple at the moment. There aren't that many blanks and doubles this season. It's quite a straightforward FPL season, at least on paper at the moment. What we currently know is we have double Game Week 25 confirmed for Man City and Brentford, and we are likely to have a double game week for Liverpool and Luton in 25 as well, but that has not yet been confirmed. So 25, definitely a double for City and Brentford, so by all means bring in those players. And we're possibly likely going to have one for Liverpool and Luton as well. Until we know that, maybe don't rush out to bring in loads of Liverpool assets because they unfortunately blank in Game Week 26. So in Game Week 26, we have a blank for Liverpool, Luton, Chelsea and Spurs. Why that is so important, 25 and 26, is because obviously if Liverpool double in 25 and then blank in 26, what are you going to do? You bring in 3 Liverpool players for 25, but then you've got 3 players immediately that are blanking in 26. So maybe do you think about playing a chip in one of those 2 weeks? The other thing to note is, of course, we currently probably have a few players from Spurs and Chelsea. So if we look at my team, I've got Darwin, Salah, Trent, Porro, Palmer and Richarlison. That is 6 players that are currently blanking in Game Week 26. So you do really need to think about how you're going to set your team up for 25 and 26 to maximise the doubles, but also cover the blanks. After 25 and 26, whilst there could be a double at some point for Bournemouth and Luton, because that fixture has to go somewhere, the next notable blank or double is blank Game Week 29. And you've probably heard about this in various videos this week and read about it on social media. Blank Game Week 29 will be the biggest blank game week of the season because it is the FA Cup quarterfinals. And any team that is in the FA Cup quarterfinal, and whoever they're playing against, of course, will blank in Game Week 29. Now, because of the fifth round FA Cup draw, unfortunately, it looks like a lot of teams will blank in 29 because a lot of the Premier League teams have been kept away from each other. And of course, if the Prem teams are kept away from each other, more of them can progress to the 5th round, and obviously more of them can then progress, obviously, to the quarterfinals as well. So it looks likely that we're going to have as many as 5 or 6 fixtures not going ahead in Game Week 29, and that will include the likes of Liverpool and Man City as well. So it is likely that it's going to be pretty difficult to put out a full 11 without a chip either side of 29 or during 29, and therefore it's probably going to be the case that you need to think about either using a chip after, such as a wildcard, or free hitting in 29, or at least making transfers now to allow you to get 8 or 9 players in Game Week 29. So that's the notable blank game week is Game Week 29. And then after that, we just have 2 further, which is blank and double Game Week 34. It will be a bigger double than it will blank, but there's likely to be a couple of blanks and maybe a few doubles as well. And then also probably one of the bigger double game weeks of the season, which is double Game Week 37. And the doubles in 34 and 37 are largely going to be the blanks from 29. So the teams that blank in 29 are then going to have their fixture usually rescheduled to 34 and 37. So just to recap, in case you are completely lost at this point, we have double Game Week 25, blank Game Week 26, blank Game Week 29, which is the biggest blank of the season, and then double and blank 34, and then double Game Week 37. And then at some point, that Bournemouth and Luton game will go somewhere, and it will cause a small double. And we may have various other little doubles throughout the season based on other things that aren't currently foreseen. So hopefully you've got a clear understanding now of what is coming up. I think there are various ways that you can approach this. So what I've got here is 4 different strategies that you can do with your chips to allow you to navigate these game weeks. A few little caveats though. Triple captain has not been included here because I think it just muddies the water. Triple captain isn't a chip that you necessarily need to plan too much in advance, because in any given game week, you've probably got the best captaincy option in your opinion. And if you don't, you probably bring them in, right? Therefore, you can just use the triple captain whenever. Obviously, you can't use it during the time when you're using another chip. So if you're bench boosting in 25, you can't also triple captain in 25. So you do need to consider that. But if you're going to have the best captain most weeks, then just play it in any week that feels good to you. I also think that triple captain is comfortably the worst chip. You're only getting 1 extra game. Let's say you're going to captain Haaland anyway. You get Haaland times 2. All you're getting is a third lot of Haaland. And yes, it's probably the best player in the game for a double game week that you're getting for a third time. But I just think it's quite an underpowered chip. Sometimes it goes really well, but often you're not missing out too much. So triple captain's not included here. And then the final thing to note before we look at the 4 strategies is that a lot of people won't have one of the 3 chips here. And if you don't, unfortunately, I can't cover every different possibility, but you just need to think, if I don't have a wildcard, what else can I do to navigate all of these weeks? If I've already used my free hit, what can I do? Because you have to just pick your battles. Some weeks you will get a big red arrow if you use some of your key chips, and some weeks you'll be able to get a green. You need to decide which weeks you want to attack and which weeks you want to just try and skate by. So I'm going to try and go through these as briefly as possible. Strategy 1 is around realizing that 29 is going to be very difficult to deal with and not wanting to use loads of valuable free transfers to try and field a good 11. Because, yes, you could say, well, I'll just put out 8 players. But even so, you are going to have to use transfers, and maybe quite a few of them, to make sure that you have a good or decent enough team for blank game week 29. And that is not a particularly optimal use of transfers, right? So what strategy 1 allows you to do is just bin that off, right? You just say, I don't really care. I'm just going to not use any transfers for 29, and I'll just free hit in that week. I can focus purely in the build up to 29, and then I can make sure my team is also good for 30, 31, 32. And then you wildcard a little bit later in the season. I like that as a strategy. I then think that because you free hit in 29, you don't need to wildcard directly after that, right? I don't see the value in, for me, free hitting in 29 and then wildcarding in 30 because, well, then you didn't really need the free hit in 29. You could have just used transfers to build towards it and then wildcarded out of it. So I don't like wildcarding straight after a free hit. The other reason I like wildcarding as late as 33, or as you can see in strategy 3, 35, is it allows you to set up for a bench boost in either 34 or 37. And I like the idea of wildcarding just before a bench boost because I think it allows you to make sure that none of your players are injured, or as few as possible, and also make sure that the players you've picked aren't suddenly out of favour. If you wildcard and then 10 weeks later bench boost, most of the time, by that time, your bench is a mess. Like right now, my bench is Salah, Pau Torres, and Charlie Taylor. It's a nightmare because I wildcarded ages ago. So I think wildcarding just before a bench boost is quite nice. You can see strategy 1 and strategy 3, the 2 on the left, are actually the same. It's just that in strategy 3, you're setting up for a bench boost in 37, and in strategy 1, you're setting up for a bench boost in 34. So that is one possible strategy. Deal with 25 and 26, free hit into the big blank game week, wildcard after that, and set up for a final bench boost in one of those 2 double game weeks. Hopefully you're still with me. Strategy 2 and 4 differ slightly from that kind of more basic strategy. Strategy 2 is the idea that actually 25 could be a decent week for a bench boost. I've looked at it, and if some of my players come back from fitness, it's actually not shocking. And we know at the moment that obviously City definitely double. If Liverpool also get the double, you might be in a position where you're benching pretty decent players, like Arsenal players, Chelsea players, maybe a Solanke. And if that's the case, then it's like, maybe I just bench boost in that week. The reason that I like getting the bench boost out the way, even if it's not necessarily perfect in 25, is it allows you to focus your wildcard on your starting 11. You don't have to worry about wildcarding to set up for a bench boost in a double game week. You can make sure that at all points, all of your attention and money is focused on that starting 11. It also means that I think if you're bench boosting in 25, because the bench boost is out the way, you probably wildcard a bit earlier. And because you wildcard a bit earlier, I think it also allows you to save the free hit. So in strategy 2, you are dead-ending into 29. And what we mean by like dead-ending your team is you try and build a team towards putting out a good 11 in blank game week 29, right? So you try and put out the best 11 possible. That might involve removing City players, removing Liverpool players, bringing in Fulham and Nottingham Forest players or something like that. You just build your team towards free hit 29 so that you can put out a good team for game week 29, but it's probably pretty crap moving forward, right? You don't want to hold the players that you've got after that. You probably want to bring in City, Liverpool, Arsenal players once again that you may well have removed for game week 29. So you dead end your team into 29, wildcard out of that team in 30 or 31. And then, like I said, you've then got your remaining free hit for either 34 or 37. You can decide which you think is the more optimal week to play that free hit. So I like strategy 2 a lot. Get the bench boost out of the way, wildcard a bit earlier, and save your free hit for a double game week. I would say this is up there at the moment, strategy 2, as one of my favourites, just because it allows you to use your free hit in a more aggressive game week and also use your bench boost now, which allows, again, you to focus on building a stronger wildcard draft. The final one, strategy 4, is basically the same as strategy 2. You're just saving your bench boost for one of the other doubles. So you still dead end your team into 30 or dead end your team into 29, wildcard out of that, and then you've got a free hit and bench boost using 34 and 37. You may free hit in 34, bench boost in 37, or vice versa. I think all 4 of these strategies could work. There are other strategies that I've not even considered here. Hopefully I haven't confused you massively and I've provided at least a little bit of valuable information. I've been talking for far too long, so let's move on to some more specific things for Game Week 22. So one of the other key decisions this week for a lot of people is who to bring into the midfield, especially if you're selling Salah. Now, I don't think you need to sell Salah. Salah could well be back for 24. We don't currently have a very definitive update around when he comes back. I think you are fine to sell him though. And I think for a lot of people, it does make sense if you've got 2 free transfers, your team's looking strong, to sell Salah with one of those free transfers and allow yourself to bring Haaland back in with one move. I think that is probably a really nice strategy. For those of us like me that have 1 free transfer, if you are in a position where you can maybe roll for 1 more week, play the players that you've got, and then assess going into 23, that might be a slightly more valuable option for you. But regardless, I thought it'd be worth just assessing the midfielders that we've got at the moment. On your screen, you've got like 14 or 15 of the best midfielders and some of their data. So we've got price, minutes, non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90 for the season, non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90 over the last 6, and then fixture difficulty across the next 6. So just some of the more basic data. I'm not going to dive too much into each of them. And then, as you can see directly above my head, I have some players that aren't included on the list. For example, Saka and Palmer, both great. I would be happy bringing either of them in. I'm assuming you already own them. I don't think Saka is perfect at the moment, considering his price and the lack of output. And obviously, Palmer does blank in 26, and the fixtures after that aren't perfect. He could even blank in 29. So I'm certainly not saying that they are the best options, but for a lot of people, they already have them. I think Rashford is a fine issue. A fine pick for some people, but given the fact that he is on the naughty step at the moment, and given the fact that Garnacho is so incredibly good for his price, I don't really see the value in going for Rashford or Bruno or any of the other Manchester United players. I would just go for Garnacho. I'm not sure that I would touch any of them though. I've put Elise here as an equally good option as Eze, if not better, but I'd kind of like to see minutes first. But as I said, I would argue that if they're both fully fit, and maybe if Elise is on pens, then he probably is the better option. I think the way that it will swing is whoever's on pens, I think is probably the slightly better option. Bailey and Diaby are both viable with good fixtures, but there has been a drop-off recently, and I've seen a lot of Villa fans suggesting that one of Bailey or Diaby has to play and the other one has to be on the bench. It looks like it'll be Bailey that's favoured, but I just think that their minutes will be slightly shared, and I don't think there's enough value or potential to warrant going for them ahead of some of the other options. Ødegaard, Martinelli, Trossard could be good, but obviously Martinelli and Trossard are minutes issues. Ødegaard is fine, but he's very expensive, and again, there's been a bit of a lack of output from him. And I've put Hwang, whenever available, is probably going to be one of my favourite options. I really like him, but unlikely to have a fixture in blank game week 29. So hopefully that's covered some of the options that aren't on the table. Just very briefly going through them. Garnacho's fine. If you need a cheap player, which your only way to bring Haaland in soon is to have a cheap 5th midfielder, I still think Garnacho's nailed. I still think you'll get returns. But I just think if there isn't a way to get to a Neto or an Eze, it is worth the extra money. I think Garnacho is only the player to bring in for you if you really need it. But if you do really need it, and that is the only way to do it in your team, I don't think he's a terrible player, and I think you can play him most weeks and hope for some sort of attacking return. Neto, I like, but the fixtures are a bit of a mixed bag. The data in his most recent games, just before his injury and obviously coming back, hasn't been perfect. And I just think that you can potentially do better for about £1 million more if you can stretch there. So I kind of feel like Neto and Garnacho are fine at their price points if you can't move for other players that are slightly more expensive. I kind of feel probably similarly about Eze and Gordon as well. Like, Eze is great if he's on pens, and I actually think Elise coming back from open play probably makes Eze a better option, but it does take him off of some set pieces. It may take him off of penalties, and I kind of want to assess how Elise and Eze do together. The issue is they've got a great fixture this week, so it's kind of like, do you move now for one of them in the hope that you get on the right one, or do you want to leave it a little bit longer? But obviously, the longer you leave it, their fixtures will start to run out. So I like Eze. He's got a star next to his name because I do think he's a fine option. I'm just a little bit hesitant now. Gordon from 23 onwards has some great fixtures. The data across the season has been okay. But again, across the last 6, there's been a drop-off. For quite a few of the players on this list, there has been a drop-off over the last 6 games. And Gordon is one of them. He's just being run into the ground a little bit. And the issue with Newcastle is they don't have any upcoming double game weeks. And I think when there are some other teams with upcoming doubles and also players that may be on penalties or more set pieces, I just think there might be slightly better options than Gordon moving forward, which is the only reason he doesn't have a star next to his name. But he is still fantastic value, and I certainly don't mind him as a pick. We've then got 3 players at 6.5 that all offer very different things. Pascal Gross is still up there for me as one of the better options. In his last 2 game weeks, he's put up 0.7 XGI in both of them. He's on penalties when João Pedro isn't on the pitch. And, I mean, there's very little to dislike about him. Set pieces, possible penalties, really, really, really good minutes. Good fixtures still for Brighton as well. I like him as an option, and he's one of the few players that has actually improved his data across the last 6 to 8 game weeks. So Pascal Gross, for me, is still excellent value at 6.5 if you want sort of a steady Eddie that's going to get you consistent minutes and the odd attacking return as well. But then you have sort of Bernardo and Doku, 2 Man City options that, I mean, we'll discuss Foden and De Bruyne in a bit. They offer quite a lot because Man City don't have a blank in 26, but they double in 25. And they've obviously got Burnley in Game Week 22 as well. So there is a lot to like about City. And for a lot of people that can't stretch to Foden or De Bruyne, and maybe they're already going to get Haaland in, but they want a little bit more from City, they could offer really nice options. My only concern is if Pep does like to play Haaland up top and KDB in the middle, you've then got 1 remaining central midfield spot, right? And I've seen some people say that will go straight to Foden, but maybe it could go to Alvarez occasionally, or maybe it could be Foden and Alvarez and De Bruyne continues to sit on the bench. We don't really know. But if Foden isn't in a central position, I don't think he can be pushed out to the left because you've got Doku and Grealish there, and Grealish looks like he's fit now as well, which means he can only be pushed out to the right. So I don't know if at some point, even though Bernardo Silva's been magnificent, if Bernardo Silva's minutes might drop slightly in some of the easier games. Is he going to play both games in 25? He could well do. He probably will, but there's just a little bit more doubt around that. And the other issue with Bernardo Silva is his data is really poor. It always has been. There has never been a point in the Premier League where Bernardo Silva has had good data, but he is such a fantastic finisher, footballer. The chances he creates are very high quality, and he's playing with the likes of Erling Haaland and Kevin De Bruyne. So if he creates a chance for one of those, you would expect them to take it. So Bernardo Silva does defy his data slightly, but I would like to see slightly more from a pick for me. So I actually prefer Doku to Bernardo Silva. Minutes aren't as secure, but I feel like when he's on the pitch, Doku offers a lot more than Bernardo Silva from an FPL perspective. So for me, if you're going to go for one of the £6.5 million options, I prefer Doku, but they're probably not for me as options. I would rather go for Pascal Gross. You get 1 less fixture, yes, but you are guaranteeing a start in every game with better data, the possibility of penalties, and definitely having set pieces as well. So for me, Pascal Gross is a better option than Bernardo and Doku. I've then got 2 players that are recently returning to their teams. Obviously, Kudus returning from AFCON, and then Maddison returning from injury. I like Kudus as a player. He's fantastic. I mean, passes the eye test, absolutely. So talented. Will continue to get attacking returns, but the data's just not there. And I know a lot of people say this is why data's a myth. By all means, take that approach. But for me, this suggests that across 3 games, Kudus will still not be achieving 1 expected goal involvement. So you're expecting 1 goal or assist every 3 games for Kudus. Even if he slightly outperforms his data, you're still not expecting more than 1 in every 2. So I just think, yes, he's at a decent price. Yes, he's a great footballer. But with the fixtures being a bit of a mixed bag, I think you can probably do slightly better than Kudus for me. That being said, of course, I do expect him to probably, based on what we've seen thus far, slightly overperform his expected data. On Maddison, data's good, play's good. I mean, he was unbelievable in FPL and also just for Spurs before his injury. I expect him to slot straight back into that team. And if he can stay fit, he will be a brilliant FPL option. My only concern around Maddison is that you have Richarlison, who I think is arguably a slightly better option, and you've also got the blank in 26. I do wonder if now, when he's just coming back from injury, with the blank in 26, is now the time to bring in Maddison? Maybe it is. Maybe it is, but I don't think I want to go there now, considering his price point. I'm then going to just quickly discuss De Bruyne, which will leave Richarlison, Jota, Foden, Bowen, because I think those 4 are 4 of your best options, around the same sort of price, and I think I want to discuss those sort of together. So on De Bruyne, content creators in general, people seem to think with some sort of conspiracy theory, like we all talk to each other and make sure we've got the same opinion. The reason we don't tend to like De Bruyne, and the reason a lot of content creators are saying that, is his minutes aren't good enough. And if a player gets 30 minutes, but they're the best player in the world, yes, of course they can do something in those 30 minutes. De Bruyne has shown that, right? Jota has shown that in the past. Darwin has shown it it was like at 10 minutes, he got 11 points against Newcastle. Like, these players have shown that if they are good, they don't need 90 minutes to get a return. But that doesn't mean that you expect them to return in 30 minutes, or that they are good options if they're only playing 30 minutes. They aren't. Like, they're not going to get enough chances. The other thing that I want to mention on De Bruyne is that the Newcastle game was very game state dependent. He came onto the pitch needing to get Man City at least 1 or 2 goals. He was put on the pitch with the sole purpose of absolutely dominating the game, getting the ball and creating chances. I would argue that, let's say he doesn't start against Burnley. You may well think he does, but let's just say for all intents and purposes, he doesn't start against Burnley. If he comes on in the 68th minute, you would expect them to be cruising. And you may say at that point, even better, if Man City are 3-0 up and he comes on in the 60th, he's going to get loads of returns. But what's the desire and need for him to run the full length of the pitch and whip in across if they're winning by that many? Would he not just sit there in the middle of the pitch and just spray passes? And yes, he could get assists. Yes, he could score a long shot. But I kind of feel like that Newcastle game has skewed our thinking because he came onto the pitch needing to get something for City. I don't think he would have played at all in that game if City were winning comfortably. I think it was an act of desperation from Pep. He's like, we are not performing this game. Please do something, Kevin. So I don't think if he comes off the bench, we're always going to see that type of performance. And I would argue we might not see that type of performance even if he starts, because he's a player that's just coming back from injury. It was obviously a very serious injury, a re-aggravation as well. I'm just not convinced that we're going to see a marauding De Bruyne the way we saw in that Newcastle game on a consistent basis, unless they need him to be that kind of De Bruyne. When it comes to whether I think he'll start or not, he could well start against Burnley, but I suppose the issue we've got is even when he starts, he's not getting 90 minutes. And I know 60 minutes of De Bruyne is probably great, but he's 10.6 million. So for me, if De Bruyne is getting 60 to 70 minutes when he starts, and off the bench he's getting 20 to 30, maybe, but he's not always going to come on in that attacking role, I just feel like you could do better for 10.6 million. And I know Salah's out and you might have the money for now anyway, but assuming Haaland is back soon, and assuming you want Trent, and assuming you might want to keep Watkins and Saka, I don't see where you're getting this money. I feel like you've got to sacrifice someone. So I like De Bruyne. If you want to go for him, it's great. If I had 2 free transfers, and let's say I'd already sold Trent, and I had quite a bit of money in the bank, I may well move to Salah. But I just think in my specific team situation, I don't see a position where I end up bringing in De Bruyne, unless I see him starting on a consistent basis and getting like 70 to 80 minutes. So that then leaves Richarlison, Jota, Foden, Bowen. I still think Richarlison's a great purchase. I really do. He does blank in 26. Maddison is back, yes. Werner is obviously in the team now as well. And at some point, Son will return. I've spoken to enough Spurs fans now. And by the way, fans don't always give the best opinions, but I've spoken to enough Spurs fans. Every Spurs fan I seem to speak to thinks that Richarlison will still start as the number 9 when everyone is fully fit. They seem to think it is Richarlison through the middle, Sonny on the left, and then probably Kulusevski and Johnson on the right, with Maddison in the 10, and then Werner rotating with both Son and Richarlison. Yes, his minutes might be a little bit less secure, but I think he is nailed on in that Spurs team, especially at the moment when Son isn't there. I just don't see a world in which he doesn't start almost every game, if not every game. When you also consider that he comfortably has the best data on this list of players that have played a significant enough amount of minutes, because obviously Jota's got really good data over the last 6. Richarlison has the best data out of all of these players. Decent enough fixtures if you can deal with blank game week 16. Blank game week 26, I should say. That's obviously why Spurs have the 18th most difficult fixtures in the Premier League over the next 6. So if you can deal with that blank, the fixtures are pretty good. He's probably, we think, on penalties until Sonny is back as well. He's out of position. He's decent for bonus points as well. I mean, there's very little to dislike about Richarlison. I think for me, I would still be willing to bring him in this week, even if you are in a position where maybe 26, maybe you've already got 3 Liverpool and maybe 1 Chelsea, 1 Spurs. I still feel like it may be worth it because you've got 22, 23, 24 and 25 before that blank. Right, 4 game weeks is so much time that, yes, we want to focus on future blanks and doubles, but at the same time, you want to get points over the next 4. And I think Richarlison is arguably one of the better captaincy options this week, and we'll discuss captaincy a bit later. So for me, Richarlison is well worth the money and would probably be top of the list for me if you're looking to bring a player in. Bowen, I'm a little bit unsure on, just because West Ham are faltering slightly at the moment, but they are looking like they're going to get Paquetá back soon. They've got Kudus coming back as well, so maybe this is a run now where we expect West Ham to do pretty well. He's got an okay fixture in Game Week 22, and yeah, I mean, there's very little to dislike about Bowen. It just kind of feels like a very safe option. Doesn't have set pieces, doesn't have penalties. So maybe for 8.1 for those reasons, not perfect. But as we'll discuss in a second, neither do Jota and Foden. So I really like Jarrod Bowen. I think he's a player that will continue to go under the radar because he's not a shiny new toy. But he also doesn't have any upcoming double game weeks. And then you move on to the final two, and I would argue probably alongside Richarlison, the two best options, it's Jota and Foden. And the reason they are so highly in demand is Foden has a guaranteed double in 25, and Jota is predicted to have a double game week in 25. They are both almost identical in price, and there is a clear winner in data. It's Jota. Jota's data whenever he plays is ridiculous. By the way, everyone's saying that Jota is a fantastic finisher. I think he can finish pretty well, but the data doesn't seem to suggest that Jota is a consistent overperformer of his expected data. So I think he's a fine finisher. I think he'll finish most of the chances he gets, but I don't think he's like Erling Haaland or Heung-min Son level. But Jota's data is very good. You can see 0.57 across the season is up there with the best, and 1.07 over the last 6, which is just such a few amount of minutes. That's why it's so high, is of course the best on this list. So I think Jota is, one of the best options, if not the best option to bring into midfield. I am strongly considering it myself. The next two fixtures aren't great, but if he does double in 25, it will have Burnley, Brentford and Luton in the space of 2 game weeks. But then, of course, he will blank in 26, and he's very likely to blank in 29. So it's how much you value the upcoming game weeks versus future game weeks. You're probably going to have to take him out in 26. So it's probably a 4 to 5 week punt on Diogo Jota. I really like it. I'm coming around a little bit on Jota more than I was. And for me at the moment, he's probably my most likely replacement for Salah if I am to move this week. He's an out of position midfielder playing as a forward in real life. He's playing as the number 9 for Liverpool, one of the best attacks in the league. Good fixtures as well from 24 and 25. There's a lot to like about him, and he feels in form. If you believe in that, he seems to be on a really, really nice run at the moment. So I like Diogo Jota. Foden, though, maybe feels a bit safer because we have a confirmed double in 25, and he definitely doesn't blank in 26. In fact, he has a decent fixture. So Foden maybe feels like the safer one because his minutes have been very good for a while now. He can play centrally on the left or on the right, which means that he should get minutes regardless of whichever combination Pep wants to go with. The data has improved slightly over the last 6, and across the season, it's starting to creep up a little bit to a respectable standard. It's about the same as Jeremy Doku, better than Bernardo Silva. And so when you consider the minutes, the fixtures, the double, and also the slight improvement in the last 6, there's, again, a lot to like about Foden. My only concern with Foden, along with Jota, in comparison to, like, I don't know, let's say a Pascal Gross or a Richarlison, or even an Eze and Elise, is there's no penalties and there's no set pieces. So with Foden and Jota, you are relying on them getting something from open play. And Foden just got a 12-pointer a few weeks ago. Jota just got a 19-pointer last week. They can definitely get stuff from open play, but you do always prefer to have a player that is on pens and set pieces. I'm going to leave it there because I've just been talking for far too long in this section in this video. But to recap, I wouldn't go for the cheaper players unless you really need to. And if you are looking cheap, Gross at 6.5 is probably my favourite option. If you have to go for an Eze or a Gordon or a Neto, absolutely fine. If you've just got unlimited money and you're just looking at who is the best player to bring in at the moment, I would say the top 3 for me is Richarlison, Jota, Foden, closely followed by Bowen. I do like De Bruyne, but even if you have unlimited money at the moment, I just don't think he's good enough value to probably block you from something in the future. And I just don't know if he's going to start in 22, 23, and is he going to start both in the double as well? So I'll leave it there. Let me know down below, 4 midfielders, what is your current midfield 5, and who are you looking to bring in for Game Week 22? So obviously we're going to hear from Pep on Tuesday, which is the day of you watching this and the day of the deadline. But I'm recording this on Monday evening. And there were just a few questions around Erling Haaland and what to do with him if we don't really get much of an update. And in all honesty, I'm going to predict, right, let's try and predict let me know down below if you're watching this before Pep's conference. Try and predict exactly what Pep's going to say. I think he will say something along the lines of, against Burnley, Erling will get his first minutes. He is ready. How many minutes he'll get, we will see, we will see. Something like that. He likes to repeat, we will see, we will see. I think he'll confirm that Erling's probably going to be in the squad. Maybe he won't even do that. And I think he's probably going to get minutes of some kind, but I don't think we'll get information around whether he starts or not. And I don't think we'll get information around whether he is fit enough to start or not either. I think Pep will just keep it fairly vague. So if Pep is vague in his press conference, what do we do? Some questions around captaining Haaland. Like, if we do get a relatively positive update from Pep, do we captain him or is it too much of a risk? And then also, how does that then transfer to captain Alvarez? I think unless we get news from Pep somehow, which I don't think we'll get, that he is ready to start and likely to start, I probably won't even be looking to bring in Erling Haaland because I want to see him get minutes first. Let's say that Pep says he's in the squad and he is, but he gets like 3 minutes off the bench. Then I might not even feel confident bringing him in for 23. If, alternatively, he gets 30 minutes off the bench and looks really good, maybe picks up a goal, then yeah, I'll bring him in for game week 23. And you may say, we'll just take the risk now, and you could do. But for a lot of us, we're removing pretty good options from our attack to bring in Erling Haaland. Do we not just want to see him get a few minutes in the league first? I don't ever feel fully comfortable bringing in a player that I haven't seen play a single minute in the Premier League before I bring them into my team. So I kind of feel like unless we get a really positive update, I'm not going to bring Haaland in. That's not to say that you shouldn't. It's not to say that it's a bad option to bring him in if we don't get a really good positive update. But it just won't be for me. And as a result, no, I would not feel comfortable captaining Haaland in Game Week 22. You could get only 10 minutes. And before people tell me 10 minutes of Haaland is better than 90 minutes, it's just not. It never will be. 10 minutes of anyone in world football is not better than 90 minutes of another good option. So for me, you always back the player that you know or believe is going to start. And I think there are enough other good options this week to captain them instead. So unless we get news that Haaland is definitely going to start or likely to start, I won't be bringing him in. I wouldn't feel comfortable captaining him. But by all means, go ahead and do that yourself. On Captain Alvarez, we're going to discuss captaincy a bit later at the end of the video. It puts me off slightly Alvarez as well because it's like, if you're not sure if Haaland's going to start, then you're also not sure if Alvarez is going to start. And you might be 80% sure Alvarez starts, but how sure? The other thing you then get to is if Alvarez is starting, let's say you're pretty sure Alvarez starts, how sure are you that he's going to get enough minutes? Because if Haaland is on the bench, or maybe even if KDB's on the bench and Haaland starts, like if one of KDB or Haaland's on the bench or both, they're going to come on for Alvarez as well. So I don't think there's many worlds in which Alvarez gets 90 minutes. Unless we see a situation where Alvarez, KDB and Foden start, KDB comes off at 50, 60 minutes for Haaland. Haaland comes on and Alvarez drops into midfield. That could be a situation in which Alvarez gets more minutes. But I just think there's too much up in the air for me to consider captaining either Haaland or Alvarez at the moment. Let me know down below what your plan is for Erling Haaland in Game Week 22. So there were just some questions around which forward should we be selling to bring Haaland back in, whether this be for 22 or 23. So I know I've just said there that I probably wouldn't bring him in unless we get a really good update. But let's say that you're planning to do it anyway because you've got 2 frees or you're just thinking ahead. Who are we selling to bring Haaland back in? And this is very team dependent and it's strategy dependent. We spoke about chip strategy. If you're planning to free hit in 26 or 25, that may change your opinion. If you've already wildcarded, maybe you just have to keep the player that is more likely to play in upcoming blank game week. So this will be massively skewed by the way that you're planning on attacking the upcoming game weeks. And I also think it depends on the sort of player that you are. Alvarez is, of course, if you do own Alvarez, he's the most simple player to sell for Haaland because as soon as Haaland's back, Alvarez loses penalties and he loses the number 9 slot. And he's not really been playing as an out-and-out number 9, but he's certainly been playing slightly higher up the pitch. Once De Bruyne's back, which he is, but maybe starting on a more regular basis, there's also that slot in the team on that right-hand side where Alvarez can't play. And of course, once KDB's in the team and starting, you would imagine that KDB takes a lot of set pieces off of Alvarez. So if KDB and Haaland are fit enough to start on a regular basis now, you've not only lost Alvarez's slot in the starting 11 on a consistent basis, but you've also lost the penalties, corners, and free kicks that are associated with why Alvarez has been a good pick. So for me, you probably look at selling Alvarez as the most straightforward replacement, despite him being obviously a little bit cheaper than some of the other assets such as Watkins, but he just feels like a more straightforward player to take out to bring Haaland in. My only slight thinking on this that's put me off this is he's still going to get minutes. Alvarez isn't just going to be dropped out of the starting 11. And we've now seen and we've heard KDB can't play every available minute. And Alvarez is the most logical player to either start ahead of KDB or bring on for KDB. And Haaland may be in a similar situation. We've heard murmurings that this is an injury that's not just going to go away for Erling Haaland. And his minutes may be managed for the remainder of the season. I just feel like Alvarez is going to continue to get starts and get minutes off the bench as well. And when you consider that we do have a double game week in 25 for Man City, is Alvarez going to start one of those two? I would genuinely predict yes at the moment. Let's say he gets 70 minutes and then he comes off the bench for 20 or 30 minutes in the other game. He's going to get maybe around 100 minutes, which is more than any other single game week player. So I kind of feel like Alvarez may be worth holding through to 25, just based on the minutes that he'll get in and around the other two. On top of that, if KDB or Haaland re-aggravate their injury at any point, which hopefully they don't for themselves, but Alvarez just goes straight back into the starting 11 every single game pretty much, because he will. If Haaland's out, he plays up top. If KDB's out, and he plays in that KDB slot in the midfield. So maybe it is worth holding on to him because he's likely to get good minutes in the double regardless. And if either of them do re-aggravate their injury, then he probably will end up playing in position for whoever gets injured. So I kind of feel like it could be worth hanging on to Alvarez a little bit longer. On Solanke, he's got an upcoming double at some point. The fixtures over the immediate future, or immediate like near future, aren't that bad either. They're actually pretty decent. His data's still very good. He is on penalties, all of the stuff that we know. And if he does get that double as early as 27 or 28, you may well end up regretting selling Solanke. So I don't have him, so it's a little bit more difficult when I don't own a player to try and think, would I sell them? But I feel like if I did have Solanke, I'd be very tempted to keep him. He's such a good price point. He's going to have a double soon. And I think he'll continue to tick along with attacking returns. As someone that doesn't own him, I fear him pretty much every week because he always seems like he gets pretty good chances. I do understand that in the overall scheme of things, when you've got other players such as Alvarez and Darwin that maybe double and obviously have slightly, playing for slightly better teams, it maybe feels like Solanke is the one to make way, but I would be very tempted to keep him. Obviously, if that double game week doesn't come until much later in the season, maybe like game week 37, it could be as late as, then maybe you regret holding him, but maybe a risk you want to take. I don't know. On Watkins, there has been a drop off in his data, and there's a lot to not like about Watkins. I'll start with, because we know why we want him. He's been so consistent with these returns, but he's very expensive. He's obviously not on penalties, not on corners, not on free kicks. And like I said, Villa have dropped off recently, especially away from home. They do really, really struggle. I don't think this Bailey, Diaby and Watkins triple up top is working. So I think that will be changed very soon. The issue is his returns are so consistent. He'll continue to get really good minutes. And the fixtures coming up are very, very good in the lead up to 29. If he also plays in blank game week 29... which we need to wait for the Aston Villa-Chelsea replay in the FA Cup fourth round to find out. If he also plays in 29, then you're looking at a player with great fixtures that doesn't blank in the biggest blank game week of the season. I think it becomes very difficult to sell Ollie Watkins. If he does end up blanking in 29, I think it becomes a little bit easier to sell him. We unfortunately won't know that until the game week 24 deadline, just before the game week 24 deadline. That hasn't really probably helped you at all, because I still don't know the answer to this. If you also chuck Darwin in there as well, who I know a lot of people have, I think that becomes even trickier, because until game week 25, when they might have a double, and also Burnley in 24, I don't think you really want to sell Darwin at the moment. But Liverpool blank in 26. They'll probably blank in 29 as well. And they've got Manchester City in 28. So if you're asking me as late as 26, it would definitely be Darwin to sell. But right now, if you can bring Haaland in soon, I'm not sure you can sell Darwin based on what we're seeing from him. So I would kind of say I still think the player to sell is probably Alvarez. I wouldn't feel great about it. And I just think based on how Darwin's playing, based on the fixtures for Watkins, it may well be Solanke would be the second one I would sell after that. So Alvarez or Solanke, I'd just about lean Alvarez. Let me know down below what you think in the comments. So I'll do this very, very briefly because we kind of slightly discussed him already in the midfielders section. But obviously, James Maddison is now back for Spurs and probably expected to start in game week 22 against Brentford. Some people just wanted to know, sort of, please discuss Maddison. Is he an option now? And also some questions and worries about Richarlison and Porro and whether they both become worse options now. So just fixtures-wise, the fixtures really are pretty good for Spurs. They've got some lovely home fixtures coming up. But of course, they do blank now in game week 26. The thing that I do like about Spurs is they are confirmed to play in game week 29, which we haven't really discussed in this video. So Spurs are one of the only few teams that are confirmed to have a fixture in blank game week 29. So if you can get through 26 by benching your Spurs assets, but remember that obviously Liverpool and Chelsea also blank in 26, then I don't mind it. Maybe if you're free hitting in 26, which is still an option, then Spurs assets based on the fixtures are great. Maddison is brilliant. I'm not going to say a single bad thing about him as an FPL asset. But when he does blank in 26, when you consider that he's not the cheapest asset and he's just coming back from injury, I just wonder, like, if you're going to go for a Spurs asset, just go for Richarlison right now and then maybe look at Maddison after blank game week 26. Bring him in for Crystal Palace at home in 27 ahead of a fixture in 29. I really don't mind that as an option. Whether it makes Richarlison and Pedro Porro worse options, I would say for Richarlison, absolutely not, unless Maddison is on penalties in the absence of Son, but they probably / might not even get a penalty in the absence of Son. Son could be back very soon, and I think he'll probably take penalties as soon as he's back. So that's the only way he'll make Richarlison a worse option. The reason I think it'll make him a better option is he'll be playing through balls to Richarlison all the time. He'll be the one that'll be finding Richarlison with crosses. We know Richarlison is decent in the air. So I feel like from open play, this makes Richarlison a significantly better option. I don't think it will reduce his minutes at all. So overall, I would say Maddison being back makes Richarlison a better option. On Pedro Porro, obviously the reason that this maybe makes Pedro Porro a slightly worse option is Maddison will likely take pretty much every set piece back off Porro. Maybe not all of them. Maybe we'll continue to see, I don't know, Porro taking out swinging corners because he plays on the right-hand side of the pitch anyway. So maybe for convenience, Porro continues to take some corners. But he's not going to take free kicks. He's not going to take a lot of the in-swinging corners as well, you wouldn't imagine. And therefore, a lot of the assists, I think either 2 or 3 of the assists that Porro has had have come from corners and set pieces. Yes, it does remove a little bit of his ability to assist. But what I've seen a few people suggesting, and I kind of back this, Porro makes a lot of brilliant runs into the box. Overlapping, underlapping, and he's just not had the players to find him. And with Bentancur and Maddison coming back, I think the players in the team around him now are likely to find him in the box. And I therefore think that his goal threat might increase slightly. So I think what we'll see from Porro over the next 6, here's my prediction, is we'll see a slight reduction in his expected assists, only slightly because of the loss of set pieces, but I think we'll see a slight improvement in his expected goals because I think Maddison will find him on 1 or 2 occasions, and I think that may lead to a goal for him. There's my prediction. Let me know down below if you're considering Maddison and how you think this affects Richarlison and Pedro Porro. So guys, I know this is a very long video, but if you're still watching at this point and you're not yet subscribed, please do subscribe and let me know down below in the comments if you do like these longer videos. I just decided today, I don't really care. I just decided I wanted to make a longer video. There was lots that I wanted to talk about, and I sometimes tried to rush videos and remove sections just for the sake of making it shorter, but I thought, who cares? Let me just speak for however long I want to speak for, and if you want to watch it, you will watch it. So let's discuss captaincy. It's one of the biggest parts of the game week, one of the most important things in any given game week. And in a game week like this, it is very, very difficult because there are so many options that you can choose from. And I would argue there is no standout option. I think there are a lot of decent options, but there's no standout option. I think the standout fixture on paper is, of course, Manchester City against Burnley. Burnley have consistently been a bottom 3 defence in the league this season. They're actually slightly better away from home, believe it or not, than at home. But the Etihad isn't a normal away from home fixture. So I wouldn't back that they're suddenly going to be a really strong defence here. The issue with Man City is minutes. It's not players. I would feel comfortable captaining De Bruyne, Foden, Alvarez, or Haaland if I knew they were going to get, I don't know, let's say 70 plus minutes. I'm struggling to convince myself that any of these players definitely get 70 plus minutes. If you were to predict who has the best minutes of De Bruyne, Alvarez, Haaland, and Foden, you'd probably say that man in the centre, Phil Foden. And that's why at the moment, he is the most popular captaincy choice for Game Week 22. I've run a few polls now over on Twitter. Most people are going for Phil Foden. And I think it is mainly a minutes thing. Also maybe a bit of a form thing, right? He's performing quite well at the moment. He's recently got a few attacking returns. So maybe he is the man in form. And I don't mind it as an option. His data has improved recently. I think this is a fixture where he could dominate the ball and get the ball a lot and have chances to score an assist. Like I said, I think his minutes are the best of all of the Man City options that you would want to captain. Always my concern around Foden is that his goal threat isn't fantastic. He's got decent assist threat, decent goal threat, but it's not, like when you compare it to like Richarlison or Haaland or even Solanke or Darwin, like Foden's goal threat doesn't get close. He doesn't have penalties and he doesn't have set pieces. So with Foden, you do rely on him getting goals and assists from open play, which he has done. He got a 12-pointer recently and people captained him for that. But it's just, there's less to him from an FPL perspective that can lead to points for you. So for that reason, I'm always slightly unsure about captaining Foden. But if you want to attack the fixture and you want safety of minutes, and I can't confirm minutes because it's Manchester City, but I think Phil Foden's the one. And that's why at the moment he's got my Vice armband, but he doesn't currently have the captain's armband. If you could tell me for sure that Alvarez not only starts, but gets 70 plus minutes, I think that makes Alvarez a better captaincy option than Foden. If you were to tell me that Alvarez gets 70 and Foden gets 80 to 85, I'd still go Alvarez because Alvarez is on set pieces. Even if KDB plays, I still think he might get a couple. And if Haaland's not on the pitch, Alvarez is on penalties as well. And he's also got slightly greater goal threat than Foden too. So I just think Alvarez is a better FPL option when he's on the pitch. But I just think his minutes in this game week are so insecure. They are not secure because we don't know if Haaland's going to start and we don't know how many minutes KDB will get. So for that reason, as of right now, with limited information, I prefer Foden to Alvarez. But if I could confirm that Alvarez was going to start and get good minutes, I prefer him. Hopefully that's clear. On De Bruyne, if you know that De Bruyne is going to start in your head, you're like, De Bruyne is definitely going to start, I'd captain him. Really, genuinely. Because I think he'll get 60 plus minutes. And at that point, he's a great captaincy option. I just don't know that he's going to start. And I also don't know, even if he does start, is he definitely even going to get 60? Could he get 50 minutes? If City are 4-0 up at half-time, does De Bruyne get 45? And you might say if they're 4-0 up at half-time, De Bruyne might have had 2 already, which he may have. But I kind of still feel like De Bruyne's minutes aren't quite secure enough for me to want to captain him. But I suppose if you're in a position where you've already got De Bruyne, then you think his minutes are secure enough. So maybe you should captain him. Richarlison, for me, is currently got the armband. We'll discuss my team in the final section just to make this video as long as humanly possible. But I love a lot of what Richarlison has. Great data. He's finishing his chances too. I think it is a good game, Brentford at home. It's not great, but it is good. We still think he's on penalties in the absence of Son, although that could be Maddison now. And I think his minutes are very secure at the moment, given the injuries that they've got, given how well he's been playing as well, and given the fact that Son still isn't there. Maddison's not going to play 90, I don't think. And obviously some of the other issues that they've got in their team. So good minutes, good data, good fixture, penalties. He's got everything pretty much. And like I said, he's actually finishing the chances at the moment as well. So Richarlison kind of feels like a slightly safer option than trying to predict the minutes of some of the other City players. In and around that, there are some other options like Solanke's here. I've seen a few people looking at him, but I don't know. Is he going to go out there and get you multiple returns again? I'm less convinced. Darwin and Jota, both of them playing incredibly well. Chelsea have looked a little bit suspect at points defensively, but in these big games, I find it incredibly difficult to predict which way they'll go. If you told me this was going to be 1-1, I wouldn't be like, oh, wow, I'm really shocked about that. I think it was 1-1 earlier in the season. So I just struggle a little bit with these bigger games predicting which way they'll go. Who else is there? Bowen seems to be a really popular pick. Decent fixture, decent underlying data. Again, not on penalties or set pieces, but maybe that doesn't matter. You could definitely do worse than Bowen. I kind of feel like, for me, you try and guess the Man City minutes, or if you don't want to guess the minutes, you go for who is likely to get the most, which is Foden. If you don't want to get involved with that City-Burnley game, I still think Richarlison is the best captaincy option. And if you don't have Richarlison and you don't want to get involved with the City game, then I think you are probably looking at a Liverpool attacker or potentially Solanke. You could go for Watkins, I suppose. But for me, it's probably between those few. Let me know down below in the comments, who are you looking to captain for GAMEWEEK22? So guys, just to finish up with my team, here's how things stand at the moment. It's not in a particularly good place because my defenders are just letting me down on such a consistent basis at the moment. Pau Torres confirmed out for GAMEWEEK22. Charlie Taylor, I don't yet know, but he's playing against Manchester City away. So in all honesty, if he ends up playing, he might get me negative points, so I don't really want to rely on him. At least Trent is now fit. Porro looks fine. So what it basically comes down to is, if Gabriel is fit, I should have 3 defenders. So I could be in a position where I have a full 11 and I'm absolutely fine. But I'm not sure if I want to take that risk again. So if you missed it, in GAMEWEEK21, I only fielded 10 players because I had Trent, Pau, and Taylor out. I don't know if I want to consistently field 10 players, especially as this week, it wouldn't even be for a hit. I've got a free transfer to use. Do I just use it on bringing a defender in for Pau Torres? Do I just make sure that I've definitely got 11 players? My only concern about that is Pau Torres to Estepinian might feel like the most straightforward move, right, for my team. But then do I play Estepinian ahead of Gabriel? Or do I just have him on the bench? Or do I play him instead of Trent or Porro? Like, I don't actually really want Estepinian this week. It creates a benching headache for me if Gabriel's fit. And I think if Gabriel's fit, he's arguably as good of an option as Estepinian. So, yes, it might be a good transfer for my team, but it also creates a benching headache not only this week, but moving forward. It also moves more of my money into my defense, which I don't necessarily want to do. So then the alternative is maybe I do Pau Torres to a cheaper player. That could work, but there really aren't any standout cheaper defenders that I want. And again, that would give me, I would use my 1 free transfer and it would make it a lot harder to bring Haaland back in for 23, which is probably the plan at the moment. And maybe I won't need to, and maybe I'll regret not using my free transfer, but it just feels like such a low upside transfer. But I suppose if I am in a position where I only have 2 defenders, it's probably worth it. So I may well have to make a defensive transfer, and we'll discuss that on the deadline stream. The only other possible thing that I could do is remove Salah this week for a midfielder of some kind, which obviously then allows me to get Haaland in one transfer next week. The reason that I'm not keen to do that is it means I probably have to bench Palmer. And again, I feel like I have other issues to sort this week. And if I'm not bringing Haaland in 22, well, then I might as well just wait until 23 to make that midfield transfer. So at the moment, probably the plan is to hopefully roll the transfer, maybe have to make a defensive transfer if I feel like Gabriel's not going to play. I doubt we'll get much information before the deadline, sadly. And then I'll either have 1 free transfer or 2 free transfers going ahead, obviously into game week 23, which is only a few days after game week 22. The current plan is probably to do Salah to Jota in 23. Oh, it's Diogo, isn't it, on this app? So it's bringing Jota up for Salah, and then probably, even though I'm not, I don't know if it'll be Alvarez or Watkins. Let's say at the moment it's Alvarez, because we've spoken about that already in today's video. The difficulty there is to bring in Haaland, which I have the money to do. The issue then becomes, what if Salah's available in 25 and I want to bring him in? And we'll discuss that throughout the weeks. I would then have the money to bring in someone slightly more expensive than Pau if I need to, but I probably wouldn't want to invest more money into my defense. So really, I'm going to leave it there because my light's about to die and I'm really not sure what I'm doing at the moment anyway. But the plan is probably to either roll the transfer or do Pau Torres to a cheaper defender to give me cover if Gabriel's not available. Or if I feel like Haaland's going to start, maybe I have to make the Salah and probably Watkins or Alvarez switch in game week 22. Let me know what your transfer plans are down below. So guys, there you have it, the longest video of the season. It's going to be about an hour long, which is absolutely ridiculous and probably far too long. But if you do enjoy these videos, please make sure to smash the like button. And if you've somehow not yet subscribed, please do make sure to subscribe as well. I will see you on the deadline stream, which starts at 4 PM today. So don't miss that. Until next time, thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.